Okay, we're live, Red. Okay.
How you doing,
Well,
Adrian?
oh, pretty good, Red. How you doing, man?
I'm doing chipper. I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce you. So, hey, everyone. Today I'm joined by Red Wemette. He was an associate for the Chicago outfit. He had a relationship with Tony Spilotro and Joey Lombardo. And a lot of other mini mobsters he was around. Red also met a lot of celebrities as well during his time. And Red ultimately became an informant for the government and helped put away a lot of mobsters in the Chicago outfit. So please hit subscribe if you want to get more interesting interviews like this. And without further ado, let's get into Red's story. How you doing, Red?
Pretty good, guy. I want to correct you on one or two things.
Oh, go ahead.
There are misconceptions in a lot of people. In October of 1971, I became an informant for the FBI, where I became a mole.
Right.
And I worked my way in deep undercover, to the point where I really didn't associate with the outfit until after that. So it was my way of, they used me. Used me. They got their mileage out of me too.
Yeah. Well, basically, if you want, we can kind of start, to build up to that story. How did you ultimately, what was your early life like? When did you become involved with crime and, end up flipping and, stuff like that? You go ahead and, kind of take the lead on that.
My early life was kind of average. I was born at Ravenswood Hospital in the city of Chicago, and we moved to the suburbs. Last recollection I have of a place that we lived in the city was in Avers and Montrose, and we moved to the suburbs of Wheeling, Illinois, in 1955. And so from there, we moved to another suburb, Prospect Heights. And from there, we moved to Moline, Illinois. So I went to high school at different places. I went to like 4 different high schools.
Damn.
And then finally, from Moline, we moved to Cicero, which was just outside of Chicago. It bordered Chicago on Cicero Avenue. One side of Cicero Avenue was Chicago. The other side of Cicero Avenue was Cicero. So that's how I kind of, and when I was in Cicero, I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. So really, people ask me where I grew up. I grew up in the Marine Corps, really. I really didn't grow up on the streets or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, going into the Marine Corps, I mean, that's a whole different ball game from, being a regular teenager. I mean, you said you were 17 years old, and that's when you volunteered to go in there, right?
I joined on my 17th birthday.
Oh, right on your birthday, huh?
Yeah, it was a delayed program where it delayed till you graduated from high school. And so then in June, when I graduated from high school, I left in July.
Oh, okay.
So really, I didn't think I'd come home.
Really?
No.
How's come? You just
a lot of people were dying, and I just looked at it as a good possibility. As a matter of fact, all my life, I kind of looked at things like, I may not make it past this age. I may not make it past that age. I may not do this. I may not do that. And after the outfit and testifying and everything else, John Drummond, who's a reporter in Chicago, used to be, he's retired. He told me, he said, you should write a book. He said, you had a fascinating life. You should write a book. And other people told me that too, but John was really the influence. So I did.
Yeah.
And that's what it was about. It was actually about what you're going to ask me about, my life.
Yeah. And, what I was going to mention too, today is Veterans Day. So, shout out to all the veterans that serve for the country as well, and Brad was one of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you came out of the, the military and everything like that, what was your life like then?
Very confusing. It was a big change. Civilians obviously don't live like military, so they didn't have discipline. I was out around a bunch of young guys that were hanging on corners, drinking beer and stuff like that. And I'm looking at them saying, this is not the way it was for me. I mean, it was a whole lot different. So I kind of leaned towards an older crowd that was more mature. and more at things.
Yeah, and you ultimately hooked up with some people, and you changed the voting age. Right?
That was right after I got out. That's before I did any of that. I joined, very unpopular in Chicago. Chicago's a Democratic city, and it was the Young Republican Party at the time that had a movement going, and it was called Old Enough to Die, Old Enough to Vote. And we changed the voting age from 21 down to 18 so that you could vote. So if you're drafted, those days we had to draft. Everybody was drafted right out of high school. If you didn't have, you weren't married, or you didn't have a job that was like fireman, policeman, or something like that, they drafted you immediately. That was it. There was a big call for people then. They needed people.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot different back then. I mean, you think of all the wars that were going on, the World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and all that. I mean, those were like all ones that were drafting people in. And then since Vietnam, I mean, there really hasn't been any wars that were, drafts, people having to getting drafted in.
No, as a matter of fact, I forget what year it was during Jimmy Carter's administration. I think it was 77 or 78. Jimmy Carter turned around and said he wanted to abolish the draft, and he did. And a lot of people read it in the papers that I knew and said, boy, if we ever go to war, we're going to have one heck of a time raising an army now, because it was an all-volunteer army.
But I mean, it made it to where we are now. I mean, there's still haven't had a draft or anything. Hadn't had any issues, right?
I don't think we have, but I don't think our military is as strong as it was then. Although the draftees weren't really, up to it. I mean, they were forced into going. But generally speaking, they had a lot more people. I mean, they just had a lot more people to choose from. Now it's kind of, from what I hear, they have a lot of problems with getting people to join. Even with signing bonuses, they have terrific signing bonuses and everything else. But they changed all the rules. When I was in, you had your pay, and everything else was paid for you. Your uniforms were paid for. Your housing, naturally, you didn't have to worry about. You always had barracks. You had food. I mean, all this stuff is paid for. So your paycheck was just like spending money. Now today, the guys in the military, they have to pay for their uniforms, uniform allowance. They have all different things. By the time they get down to what they actually have to live on, and if they're married or they have a kid, family, it's really rough for them. It's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, that factors in as a big difference on wanting to go up and join, I would think, for a lot of them people. Yeah. So, Red, when you got out, what else happened? You came home, you met your uncle, right? And you ultimately met a hitman with him.
I was not allowed to see my Uncle Roy as a kid. Ryan Brown's in here. Believe it or not. I can't click him on. How you doing, Ryan?
Here,
Nearly finished my book. Fantastic read. Thank you, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Yeah, he follows me around. He's a good guy. I wanted to go see Roy. I wanted to know why my parents tried to keep him away from me. And I found out he was an alcoholic. He was in bad shape. And through a gal that he was dating at the time, I met Kurt Hansen, and he was my first outfit connection. And he was a hitman. He killed people and did all kinds of other things too. But from him, he introduced me to his boss, which is Jimmy Couture. And Jimmy Couture was a made guy. He was one of those old timers that spoke broken English. He was born in Italy, and just, the old fashioned. So I kind of stayed with the older crowd all the way through it. And from there, I went on to meet other people at American Bonding. I met Milwaukee Phil and Tony Spilotro and Joey Lombardo and Joey Cosentino, a list of people that I met at American Bonding. That was kind of a hangout for them.
So what was your first introduction to Tony Spilotro?
At American Bonding, I was there with some other people, and we were talking something about business, and Tony was there, and they were doing the skim then from Las Vegas. They had taken a loan from the Teamsters pension fund, and they got a $1.4 million finder's fee for making the loan, or service fee, or whatever you want to call it. So they were taking that money and trying to put it in legitimate businesses. And while it was going into legitimate businesses, they were looking at all different things and trying to wash it, really. That's where I met Tony.
And so what was your conversation with him? Do you remember your first one that you had with him?
Hi, how are you? I mean, it was just kind of casual the first time. I think we went and got a corned beef sandwich together.
Not a lot of people can say that.
It was very casual.
Yeah.
Tony was nothing like what you see him in the movie Casino. Joe Pesci does not play Tony. Tony never swore like that. I mean, he just didn't act that way. Maybe he did things that when I didn't see him, but he was just an easygoing, happy-go-lucky guy.
Yeah, and to him, he was more of a friend to you, right? I mean, you were really close with him.
We became close friends over time.
Did you ever do any business with him?
Never. I knew he went out to Las Vegas. He was talking about it at the time. Irv Weiner and him. Irv Weiner was part of the Grand Avenue crew also, but they had a 707 jet, and they used to fly back and forth out there all the time, and to Deming, New Mexico, and Las Vegas. And he was talking about opening up he called it a haberdashery, which is, they call it a gift shop out there now. But that's what he called it himself. He called it a haberdashery. So it was kind of like, just like talking to you. I mean, there wasn't anything crazy or wild about him or anything else. I'd heard stories later. I heard stories, but I never talked about him. And he never talked about my business either. We made a rule, kind of. It was unspoken, but I don't want to talk about your business. You don't want to talk about mine. We're just friends. That's it. Drinking buddies. We drank a lot. We drank a lot together. A lot of scotch.
So, I mean, what was your, when you started hearing these things about him, I mean, how did that make you feel? I mean, what were these things?
I was shocked. I started putting the puzzle together and saying, yeah, I believe it. I believe everything. I just knew he was at certain places at certain times. I knew when he came into town, stuff like that. So I just looked at it and said, yeah, I accepted him for who he was. I'm one of those kind of people that I accept people who they are. That doesn't mean I have to like everything that they do. As long as they treat me okay, I treat them okay.
Right. Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
I don't know if there's some people, I have a limit on that. There's some people that I just don't want to know.
Yeah, that's true. There's just some crazy serial killer people out there that are even.
Yeah, or some guy comes along and lights up a crack pipe in front of you or something like that. You don't want to know.
Yeah, no, that's different.
Or some guy that's run a string of prostitutes or something like that. You just don't want to know them. That's it. You don't want to know those girls either.
So, I mean, after that, I mean, after your introduction to all these men, what was your next step, into these illegal businesses?
Actually, it was a gray line illegal business. I went into the porn business and I opened up a porn shop. Mm-hmm. Irv Weiner went to collect some money with me from different people that owed me money. They kind of pushed me around because I was just a kid to them. And during that process, different bars and things like that, and Irv used to go in there. Irv was a heavyweight. He really was. But he'd turn around and ask people. He wouldn't ask them. He'd say, well, he would. He'd ask me, say, do you want to pay him up? And no, I ain't paying him. and then he'd take them on the side and give them a slap or something like that. They'd pay me. So this one place was the Over 21 bookstore, and it was a pornography shop, and they owed me some money. And when they let me go, they didn't pay me, so they owed me a few $100s. And when we went in, he said, "I'll get your money for you." And he took me around. When we came out, he had to slap that guy around bad. And when we came out, he said, "Look for a place around here. Look for a storefront right here in this neighborhood." He said, "I want you to run that guy out of business. He's from Cleveland, Ohio. He doesn't belong here." And after that, they had to start paying tax to Chicago. So I helped them right from the beginning to make money off of other people.
Oh, so that was your introduction to all of it then.
Right.
Yeah. So when, all this was happening, when you ultimately, became an informant, but I think we should build up some more stuff.
I was an informant before then. I was an informant. I became an informant in August of 1971. That's just about the time Tony went out to Vegas.
Okay. So
I was tending bar at the time. And it was a stripper bar. Buy the lady a drink, sir. One of those kind of places, lap dances, whatever. That's what they call them today. We didn't call them that then. But at any rate, I go up to people and say at the bar and say, "Buy the lady a drink, sir." Well, there were FBI agents that used to come in, and they used to want to know who owns the place. They'd wanted to start up a dialogue with you. And we were told not to talk to them at all. Be cordial to them. Ask them if they want to buy a drink or something like that, but do not talk to them. Some bought club soda, but I just never ran into one that I had to talk to. But I saw one come in, and the bartender, Nick, was behind the bar, and he talked to him. And I saw the guy give him a card, and he picked up the card and he threw it in a waste paper basket. And so I waited till Nick wasn't around. I went over and grabbed it out of the waste paper bag, stuck it in my pocket. And I waited till later on and put it in my wallet. When I got home, I opened up, looked at it, and it said FBI. Very generic card. I mean, it was just a white card with black FBI, and it had the agent's name and a phone number, which was just the main switchboard. It wasn't a private line or anything. And I decided to call him, and I did. And we didn't have caller ID back in those days. So I told him my name. I told him everything else, but he didn't know where I lived. He didn't know it. There was no tracing a call. So he said, "How can I get back to you?" And I said, "I'll call you." And I gave him a few days, called him back. And by that time, he pulled my service record book, my SRB, and looked at my time in the military, and that I wasn't a criminal. He looked up my records, that I wasn't arrested or in trouble of any kind. And so he decided to meet with me. He said, "Can we meet face to face?" And I said, "Yeah." And I set up the meeting. I set it up at the Lincoln Park Zoo, and a very cagey kind of place where there was lots of people around. So I knew I was safe. I didn't know what they were going to do. I was kind of afraid of the FBI. I really was. It was like, okay, I've been around these guys. Are they going to grab me, pull me into a room, interrogate me, slap me around? What's going to really happen? That was a young man's mind, at the time.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know. But they really hustled me off to a small restaurant in a suburb and asked me some questions. I gave them the answers. And then they gave me a thing to sign. It said $25. And they gave me $25 cash. And we had a sandwich there or something, coffee, whatever. And then I had to pick up the check out of $25. But that was being a paid informant. When you say paid informant, yeah, I was a paid informant, but it's not like these drug deals where somebody gets, or IRS deals where somebody gets, $10,000 reward or something like that. It wasn't anything like that at all.
You were getting cheeseburgers.
And yeah, I was living on cheeseburgers. But basically, when I really realized how serious it was, I was in court one day And a defense attorney on cross-examination asked me, he said, well, how much did the government pay you out of the taxpayers' money? And he points at the jury. And I said, I really don't know. I really don't. And on redirect, the prosecution came to me, and they had a cheat sheet where they knew all the answers to it. And so they said, would you believe that over a 20-year period or 18-year period that you were paid approximately $10,000? And I said, no. And he said, well, I have the numbers right here. And he looked at it, and he said, would you be surprised to find out that that's $1.63 a day? And I said, yeah, I would. But then they gave the copy of that to the defense so they could see it.
Damn. So that's all you were really getting out
Right.
of this whole thing. I mean, to you really, the reason you did it was why? Because
I didn't like people being murdered.
Mhm.
Bookmakers, people I knew, people I saw. All of a sudden, an ambulance pulled up. They were dead. Somebody killed them. For what? Because they wanted their money?
Yeah.
Didn't make sense to me. But
So
then I
that's-
learned to work within the system to help myself, which I can't say I didn't help myself because I made good money in that store. I made very good money. But and other things I did, I made money. But they always took a piece of my money, so no problems. It worked out.
Yeah, and when you went and you had to testify, were you ever you weren't ever supposed to be testifying, weren't you? When you made this deal, what was your arrangement?
No, when I first made the deal, I'm the one that jumped out and said I was angry at Frank Schweiss because he was telling me about how they murdered Tony and his brother Mike, and I was going and not showing any emotion at all. But I went to the U.S. attorney. That was in June of 1986. And I went to the U.S. attorney, went over the FBI's head, didn't even call my control agent. I went to the U.S. attorney and talked to him. We set up a meeting at a hotel. And I said, this guy's telling me about this. He's telling me about that. And they said, we can never get him on tape. I mean, the guy doesn't have a telephone. He uses other people's phones. He goes to somebody else's house. He uses a payphone down the street, never uses the same phone twice. He said, we can't, there's no way. He's really good. We've been trying to get him for like 30 years. We can't get this guy. It's impossible. And whenever you see him together with somebody, Wayne Bach or somebody like that, they're going out to do a murder. They're going out to do a hit. And so I said, well, he talks to me all the time. So they said, well, we'll see if we can get a court order. They went to their supervisor. The U.S. attorney did. He went to his supervisor. He approved it. Then they had to go before a judge, get a court order, and they got the court order. Then they had to go to the FBI and get the equipment. Then they brought it to my house. Then they didn't have what they call a technician available to hook up the equipment. So I wound up hooking it up myself.
You were able to figure it out.
Finally up and running. It started in right after Tony was murdered, and that was 1986. We were up and running by January of 1987.
Damn.
So less than 6 months we got it up, but the government moves slow on everything.
They take their time.
Oh yeah. Well, they go through channels.
Yeah, a big chain of command or whatever. So what was for you, what did you hear that, what happened with Tony Spilotro? Why was he murdered?
Basically he screwed everything up in Las Vegas. I don't think he did that alone. I think he was but he was responsible for it. He was responsible for all those people. So if anybody screwed up, he should have taken care of it, but he didn't. And he was on, towards the end, last few years, couple of years, he was doing a lot of cocaine, and he was all messed up all the time. So didn't know what dates it were, different things, Anybody that uses drugs probably understands, or used drugs at one time. They probably understand. But he had the idea that he was going to come back to Chicago and be the next boss. And the other people that were there that already had their territories and everything else said, oh, no, he's not coming and take a piece of our action. He screwed up out there. Let's get rid of him. So they decided to murder him. A lot of people wonder if Joey Lombardo signed off on it. He was in prison at the time, and Joey did not sign off on it. He had no power. He had no say-so. He was in prison. What's he going to do? Send a message to somebody else saying, well, if you kill Tony, you're going to have to kill me? No, it's not that way. It doesn't work that way.
So what was your relationship with Joey then, Joey Lombardo?
Very good one. Very good. Joey and I we really never had an argument or a beef or, hard words between us. Always a smile on his face. And I was always kind of easygoing with him, smiled at him whenever I saw him. As a matter of fact, when he was getting ready to go to prison, we had a big meeting. He was out on bond. He had to surrender himself to go to prison. He'd already been convicted. And he had Alan Dershowitz working on his appeal at the time. And we had this meeting. And at the meeting, we were all supposed to be there, and I was there. And he looked over at me and he said, then he looked at Frank Schweiss. And everybody calls him the German now, instead of calling him Frank Schweiss like I did. I just call him Frank. Nobody ever called him the German or anything like that around me that I ever heard. I think that was a moniker that he picked up later on through the news media, although he was German. But at any rate, Joe looked at him and said, he pointed at Frank and he said, you see this kid over here? You take care of him while I'm gone. Whatever he needs, you take care of it. Well, he had a reputation for being a very rough man. I mean, he was a killer. He was a killer. You did what he said. Otherwise, he put you in the ground or leave you lay on the sidewalk somewhere. So I was thinking to myself, that's a lot of power to throw in my hands, But I never really used Frank until I had a couple problems. And with a collector that they sent in because everybody's going to prison. And when I called Frank in, I called him and I said, I need to see you. He was in Florida at the time. And I was trying to get to him for almost a year. And when I did get to him, I said, I'm not happy with these arrangements. I'm really not. And he said, what's wrong? And I told him, he said, oh, that's not good. And he said, well, I'll get somebody else for you. And I said, look, Marshall's in prison. Marshall Cofano, he's in prison. All these people I know are either in prison or they're dead. I don't want to know any new people, Frank. I really don't. And they said, what about me? He said, you trust me? I said, well, you're here, aren't you? And he said, give me the money then. So that's how we got him for extortion. During Family Secrets, if he would have testified, if he would have been well enough to stand trial during Family Secrets, there would have been a lot more murders solved. But he was never, he wasn't, he had brain cancer. He had lymphatic cancer and brain cancer, and he wasn't able to testify. They were supposed to have a Family Secrets 2. Really? And it was all built up, and it never happened. He died.
So no one was able to ever testify then?
No, there were other people. There were other people. There was a lot of people lined up. I mean, they had a lot of things they could have talked about, but they didn't. They never got done.
So when you were in Family Secrets, you were just involved with this one big trial, right? You were involved with this one, and you helped put away quite a few people, right? Was this the only trial that you were part of?
Before that, I was in. I was at Schweiss's trial for extortion on me. We had it on videotapes. As a matter of fact, on my vlog, we have a session of the lost tapes, we call it, because they're actually me, the undercover tapes. I had copies of them, and I gave them to Adam. And so I gave a chance for people to see them, that sort of thing. But I testified in that trial. That was in October of 1989. And that was a big deal. I mean, it was really kind of a big deal. Very guarded. I didn't have I went through the undercover division of the FBI.
Mhm.
And so I did not have, everybody thought I went into witness protection. That's what the media said. That was the press release, that I was in witness protection. Because if you go into witness protection, really nobody, if you follow the rules, nobody ever finds you again. It's like Ken Edo. To the day he died, nobody ever knew where he went. And he was living in Atlanta, Georgia.
Damn. So if you follow the rules, you make it.
Yeah, but I didn't. I went through the undercover division of the FBI. They changed they gave me a new passport. They gave me a lot of other things. During that period of time, I got involved with the ATF, and we did. I went to them because the FBI didn't want to be involved in it, and that was the Schussler-Peterson murders with the 3 boys that Ken Hansen killed, and so they got involved in it because there was an arson attached to it. They could get involved with arson and murder. So they got involved and they put a case together. It went before the state's attorney. And then I came and testified at that one. And then I came back because they won an appeal on that one. They screwed up. He was a pedophile, homosexual pedophile. And as a result, they put people on the witness stand that were really kind of, they said we're going to get crucified. The agents and the guys I talked to said, we're going to get crucified by gay rights. And he said, this is going to get appealed. And it did. It won an appeal. So in 2002, we went back on that one. And shortly after that, I got a call from, trying to think of his name right now. Can't. Good friend of mine, Tom Moriarty. And Tom said, Mitch is trying to get a hold of you. And I said, well, have him give me a call. And he said, well, he can't call you. He said, it's against the rules. He's a U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney. So he cannot call you. You have to call him. And I said, you can call me. And he said, yeah, but I know you. And, we've always had phone numbers, a personal relationship. And, our families know each other and stuff like that. And so I gave him a call. And I talked to Mitch and he said, we caught up on small talk and stuff like that. I've known Mitch for years and liked him. Nice guy. So while we were talking, he said, is it okay if, he said, I'm putting a case together. And he didn't give me the name of the case. He didn't tell me it was Family Secrets. But this was in 2002. He was telling me about it. And he said, I'm putting this case together. And he said, do you mind if I send some of my investigators down to talk to you? And I said, don't tell me they're FBI. I don't want to hear about the FBI at all. Don't tell me they're. And he says, oh, no. These guys are good guys. He said, we have a new FBI now. It's different than back in the old days. And I said, okay. So they came down. They were great. They really were. Chris Mackey was kind of attached to me. And the other agent was the chief agent at the time and head of the mob squad. And they were really great. They talked to me. We put some things together. They kind of they asked me a lot of questions, showed me a lot of pictures, and some of the people I just didn't recognize at all because they had come into power since I left. And then after we talked a while, they left and Mitch called me and said, I'll be down in a week. And he came down to Florida and saw me in a week. And we walked around. He was looking at paperwork. And as he was looking at his paperwork, he said, do you know that you're reciting everything that was written in a courtroom text years ago? He said, and I said, well, that's one thing about, telling the truth. If you just recall, there's a lot of times I'll say, I don't know, or I forgot, or I don't recall. But if you just say what it really was, you don't have to think about it.
Right.
It's lies. You have to remember how you lied.
Yeah.
But you don't have to remember on the truth. So I looked at him. I was kind of shocked by what he said. And I looked at him and said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, I'm reading it word for word. You're saying it word for word. Everything the exact same way. Nothing's changed at all. And I was kind of impressed by it. And he said, do you think you could come in and do a trial? And I said, yeah. And he made some arrangements. About 2 years later, he came back and saw me a second time. But about 2 years later, he came in and made some arrangements. And their old transcripts, court transcripts, were moldy and in bad shape. But I had ones that were in pristine condition at my house. And I ran back home, brought them to the hotel room. He looked at me and said, wow, what'd you do? Keep these in a safe? And I said, yeah, I did. and he said, boy, they're really in good shape. So he used my transcripts to actually work off. And we had a great working relationship. It was really good.
So when it came to testifying, how many people could you say that you put away?
Actually, at that particular trial, most of my putting people away was done covertly. I would talk about something that they did. They'd go talk to somebody else, and then they make the arrest. Somebody roll. They'd plead guilty and testify against the other person. So I never had to come in and actually go before the courts. At Family Secrets, it was very different. It was a circus. It really was. It was a circus. And I was there for like maybe 2 months before it even started. One of the things that was a killer on it came out, and the indictment came down in 2005. First thing happens, Joey Lombardo takes off. He disappears. They took a DNA swab from him. That was it. He left. Frank Schweiss, same thing. He disappeared. So they were gone. They weren't captured to 2006 and late 2006. Their attorneys had to get ready, and we really didn't go off till 2007 with the trial. The only thing I testified to at the trial, because it only involved, I did not know the Calabrese family. I did not know Jimmy Marcello, although they'd show me pictures of him, asked me if I knew him. Didn't know who he was. But I did know Joey, and Joey was there. And they had Joey on murder charges. They had him on all different kinds of things. I mean, they really had him on a lot of things. And the only thing that they wanted me to do was verify on a tape where Frank Schweiss is talking about Joey. He turned around and said on the tape, I believe his exact words were, didn't Lumbo go over and talk to that guy for you? And the guy was the main guy that he went to talk to. And we were talking about it on tape. And so he played that tape in court. And then they asked me, who was he referring to? And we found out. So that's how that went.
Yeah. Hey, Colby. Also, I was just going to say, when you were a key witness, didn't you have a hit on your head as well?
When Frank was first arrested, a cop came to me that I knew, a Chicago police officer, and said, there's $1 million tag on you. He'd never been locked up without bond. All the years he committed more murders than his age, but he'd never been locked up. He always got bond, got out, and then all of a sudden the person disappeared. The witness, whatever. So he was like, he had to get out of jail free card. Not with me. Not with me. They held him without bond because on one of the tapes that he made, or that I made, he said, I won't see you for a while. I'm going out of town. I got to make a hit. And when they played that before the bond judge, Joan Lefkoe, the magistrate, she turned around and said, definitely no bond. And that's the first time he ever got no bond. And he was locked up in the MCC. He did not like that. The guy lived lavishly. He lived very lavishly. So he didn't like it at all. At that point, that's when I heard about the contract on my life.
And that's who he...
I thought that was an awful lot of money at the time. I said, they do things for a lot cheaper now. I mean, $10,000, $50,000, something like that, a finder's fee, right? $1 million. He wants to run out real bad,
So was there ever any attempts or anything that ever came close to you?
No, nothing that I couldn't handle. I mean, I knew things, and when Joey got out of prison, somebody else had called me. I had a pager at the time, a Sky page, and they called me. They needed something. And I'd known the guy for a long time. And he used to sit with Joey every day when he got out of prison. And so I asked him, I said, how's the guy doing? Never giving a name. I said, how's that guy doing? He said, okay. He said, I see him every morning. And I said, you asked me for a favor. I'm going to trade favors with you. Ask him if I'm okay with him, if we got a problem between us. And so he said, why don't you ask him yourself? And I said, I'm not in Chicago. I'm nowhere around you. And so he said, well, I give you a phone number and tell you when to call. And you call this, it's a payphone. And he said, it's a restaurant where we go, he told me it was a restaurant. And so I called, and somebody else answered the phone. And I said, is JL there? Yeah, wait a second. He came to the phone, and he said, hello. And I said, hey, guy, how you doing? And he said, okay. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I want to know if we got a problem between us. And he said, no. He said, whatever you did, you must have had your reasons for doing it.
Damn.
And he said, you stay away from me, and I'll stay away from you.
Did that give you some relief after he said
that? A lot of relief. Sure, a lot of people are walking around now, younger people than me, are walking around now and saying, oh, a rat, a snitch. Or what's the younger people say, what is it? Snitches get stitches or something like that. These phrases.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that with me. Not like that at all.
Damn. So ultimately that's what happened, and there was a lot of people that were involved with this case as well. What was Frank Cullotta's, do you know what his involvement was with the family secrets?
Frank Cullotta?
Yeah, that's how you say it. My bad, I mispronounced it.
He was actually on the some of his things were kind of misleading. He was actually on the witness list to be a witness. And he'd been in several different trials. And I knew of him. He was part of our crew, but I never met him. And he had perjured himself like 3 or 4 times in court. And Mitch Mars said to me, he'll be this witness, putting everybody in order. I was the first one on. Actually, the second one. The first one was a retired FBI agent that was called a mobologist, where he could explain the terms to people. And
they had one of them.
Yeah, retired FBI agent got on. Then I was the first witness.
Wow.
To break everything open with the tapes and everything else.
Yeah.
And right after me, there was somebody else. But at that time, it was really a circus atmosphere. If you had to take a number to get into the courtroom, and then you had to stay in your seat. If you left your seat to go to the washroom or something like that, you didn't get it back. They gave your number to somebody else. There were people waiting in the hallway, just waiting for it. It was a circus atmosphere, very much so.
That many people that were interested in it, huh?
From all over the country. There were people from everywhere. So anyway, when it came to Cullotta, I didn't know him. I didn't know him at all. Never did.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing I ever even got close to him was with Coffee with Cullotta.
Oh.
With Adam.
Yeah.
And, actually saw him, and he knew people that I knew, like Mikey Switek and other people that I knew. I knew all that whole crew. And he'd talk about him. I stole with this guy. I stole with Peanuts Piansko. I knew Peanuts. I knew Peanuts real well. He worked for me. But I just never made it to him. But I didn't have a very good opinion of Frank. The reason I didn't was because he perjured himself in court. And I believe his own brother got up and said he lies. He got on a witness stand and said, my brother lies. He's known to be a liar. And so I looked at him at that time as someone that I really didn't want to be associated with. And he was coming out with a book at the time also. And he thought he could promote the book through actually coming to the trial.
Really?
And oh, yeah. And so I told Mitch, I said, Mitch, if he goes on the stand, I go home. That's it. I'm not going to be a part of this. I said, I don't want anything to do with it. You can't hold me with a subpoena or anything like that. I haven't done anything.
Right.
So Mitch let him go, and he never did testify.
Let's see. Ryan Brown asked, about the Mad Sam basement story.
Oh, that's crazy. Did you read about it? Do you know what it is?
It's familiar, but so the people, kind of break it down so they can get
Okay. I was kind of assigned to Kenny Hansen to drive him around and take care of him, that sort of thing, by Kurt. And Kurt was his brother, Kurt Hansen. And when I did, I went out and picked him up. He lived out in Tinley Park, which is maybe about 45, 50 miles away from where I lived. But I did a lot of driving those days anyway. So I go out and pick him up, and I drop my car off there, and we take his car, which was illegal anyway. The plates weren't good on everything else. Everything was illegal. So I drive him, and he says, now turn right here, turn left here, go right here. Whatever. He's giving me directions. Hi, Tracy. So he's giving me directions, and finally we pull up at this house on Sayre, and he said, the garage door is opening up, and he said, pull in the garage. And so I pulled in the garage, and he had his dog in the back seat, Doberman Pinscher. And I got out of the car. He got out of the car, and we walked in, and Anita was there, Sam DiStefano's wife, and she was cooking pasta sauce, and she had fresh bread. It was really good, and she broke some off, and she dipped it in the sauce, tomato bread, and she handed it to me. She said, "You want to try some?" And I said, "Yeah." And I took a bite of it. It was really good, really, really good. So we walked down to the basement. This guy was leading us, and we walked down into the basement, and there was a table with like an oilcloth, checkered oilcloth square. It was a square table, probably 3x3 or 4x4 table, square. And on the side of it, against the wall, there was like a love seat or a small couch, what we would call a small couch back then. I don't think we even called them love seats then.
Right.
So at any rate, I sat in the love seat or whatever, and Ken Hansen was directed to sit with his back towards me. And about maybe 10, 15 minutes later, down the steps, which is right over my shoulder, comes Sam DiStefano. Sammy D, we called him. We didn't call him Sam DiStefano. We called him, DiStefano is the right way to pronounce it. But we called him Sammy D. So he's coming down. He's in his pajamas. He always wore pajamas and a robe. This guy, unless he was outside, he got dressed to go outside. Yeah. That's about it. If he was going to sit on the porch, he didn't get dressed. I'll tell you that much. He was very strange. He was a strange person. But even before he came down, I was looking around the basement, and I looked at things, and I said, okay, this is a nice finished basement. It's got tile floor. It's got, paneling on the walls and everything. It looks real nice. It's finished. But there's a drain hole in the center of the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, bad things must happen here. And I looked over on the wall over there. They had it turned out to be an altar, it had black cloth on it, and it had a pentagram above it. It was a devil worshiper. Had black candles coming up. It was really kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But I'm checking all these things out when I was waiting for him. Now he comes down the stairs, and he comes over by Hansen. He sits down at the other end of the table, pointing towards me. And as he's pointing towards me, he said, "You know why you're here, Kenny?" And he said, "No, Sam, I don't." "You know why you're here." And he starts getting, and Hansen just kept saying over and over, no, I don't know anything, And it was kind of a laughing thing. And he said, finally, he's foaming at the mouth. I mean, literally foaming at the mouth. Jeez. And he said, "I'm going to kill you." And I'm going, it's all racing through my mind. If they're going to kill him, they're not going to leave me here.
No way.
this is a bad thing, And so I was scared. I was a little upset at the time. And eventually Hanson turned around and said to him, Sam, when I'm gone, will you do me a favor? He said, what? I told you I'm going to kill you, and you want me to do you a favor? I mean, he just really, he stood up from that. He said, what do you want? He had his arms on the table. He said, what do you want? And he said, Sam, when I'm gone, would you take care of my dog? She's up in the car. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. I was up the stairs. I was taking 3 steps at a time going up the stairs. I was out of there.
Oh my gosh. So the dogs.
I'm told, and I believe to this day, that I'm the only living person that went down to that basement that came out alive.
So the dog essentially saved his life by him saying that, you think?
He was witty. Hanson was witty. He was like so timid. I mean, subservient. I mean, okay, you're going to kill me, okay, will you take care of my dog? And Sam just got enraged over it and said, get out of here.
Just leave and go take care of your damn dog.
That was his attitude, evidently.
Jeez.
So that was my trip to Sam DiStefano's basement. DiStefano.
Wow,
a lot of people don't know how to pronounce it. It's really DiStefano. It's not DiStefano. But I never called him by his last name because we always said Sammy D.
Yeah.
And his brother was Mario. So we just said Mario from Cicero,
Yeah.
It's like people call me Red. They call me Red from Wall Street. There was another Red that we had from another place, so they called him by location.
Right.
We didn't really say last names a lot.
Just
even when I talked about Joey, I said JL.
JL.
I never said anything but JL. You're from JL? Or the little guy? The little guy's coming into town. Did you see him? Yeah, he stopped by me. That's all. Little guy is Tony Spilotro.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who else were some of the guys that you were around?
Milwaukee Phil in the beginning till he went to prison. He was a powerhouse.
You got an interesting story about him?
Yeah, I do. I really didn't know it at the time what was going on, but he had a lot to do with financial institutions. And there was one place called Marshall's Savings and Loan, and it was in Berwyn, which is kind of attached to Cicero. They're right together. And they held a board of directors meeting on New Year's Eve. This is before I went in the Marine Corps. And what they did was they gave out leases on properties that they foreclosed on to outfit guys, so that these outfit guys could make money off the properties, but they give them like a 99-year lease for $1 a year, $10 a year or something like that. So it was a sweetheart lease, but it couldn't be broke. And then they would go defunct. That Marshall Savings went defunct. They went bankrupt.
Damn.
So Phil was involved in a lot of that. He was involved in the skim. He was involved in, he was partners with Danny Seaford, Joey's father, Joey Seaford, and Nick Seaford's father. He was partners with him in the fiberglass company, and a lot of other things. They were trying to cut up that skim money that I was telling you about from Circus.
What was Joey Lombardo's situation with Danny Seaford? Was he the one that ultimately ended his life, or what was the situation with that?
He tried to warn Danny. Danny was only 29 years old then at the time.
Yeah.
And he was trying to warn Danny. He says, you can't testify against us. It's not going to work. Go do your time. We'll take care of your family, that sort of thing. Danny didn't want any part of it. He said, you don't own me. You can't tell me what to do. And then Phil died. Phil was in prison. And then he was really in trouble because Joey was his partner and Irv Weiner was his partner. I think Irv sold out and somebody else went in. But they had the Grand Avenue crew basically owned it. Even Tony Spilotro had a piece of it. Damn. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know Tony had a piece of it at the time. I didn't put it all together. I was doing a lot of things myself. I wasn't just taking notes. I wasn't a
No.
historian running around, making notes and taking care of things like that. But eventually, he kept trying to warn him. He talked to him several times. Used to drive by the house all the time, trying to talk to him, and Danny wouldn't have it. And so they murdered him. And Joey went on that hit with that hit team, and that was a hit team. There were a lot of people involved in that. Only to kill one person, there was a lot of people involved in that. Paul Sharo, who was just recently released, he was there. Joey Hansen, he was there. Frank Schweiss, he was there. A lot of people were there.
So this was an important hit.
Very important. He was going to take them all down for the skim from Las Vegas. This was in 1974. So Joe went along on the hit. And unfortunately for Joey Seaford, he'd gone with his parents to work that day. And Emma, his mother, and Danny, his father, they kind of worked as a team. She was like a secretary or whatever for their company. So they went into, I don't know, they were going to vacuum floors or do something. I don't really know. Joey would know better than me. I think he said on his broadcast what he was there for. But what had happened was immediately Joey came through the back door and grabbed Emma and little Joe, who was his godson. In real life, it was his godson.
Damn.
And he pulled him into the bathroom and said, "This is a robbery. Don't do anything. Don't move." While they were trying to take Danny alive, they were going to torture him. They were going to really do a number on him, but they wound up killing him. And so it was a bad thing. Yeah. And afterwards, it was kind of shocking to me because they had composite charcoal sketch artist. And when I looked at one of the faces, it looked like a portrait of Joey Lombardo. It really did. The shape of the face. I mean, just everything. It looked like a portrait.
You could tell it was him then right away.
We were all laughing. We were all laughing, talking to each other and said, "Well, you're on TV. They got your face up there." But I didn't know Danny, and I didn't know what it was about. It wasn't any part of my business. I found that out later. But later on, I talked to Joe many years ago. I think it was in 2000. It was after Family Secrets, and they were writing a book. And when I talked to him, I told him they were doing research on the book. It was a conference call between Nick and Joe Seaford. And I told him, I said, the only reason you guys are alive, or you're alive today, Joey, is because Joey Lombardo was there to protect you. He wanted to make sure they didn't kill you. Because the other guys, they wouldn't have left anybody around. Nobody. They'd have killed a dog if it was there. If they had a dog there and killed a dog. No witnesses, period. They're all shooters. Heavy shooters.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were lucky enough to get away with their life. But still, I mean, what a horrible situation that is, man. I mean,
they lived through, I didn't realize it until I talked to Nick years later. But they went through a lot of hard times because of that. I didn't realize the IRS leaned on him. They levied everything because he was dead. He couldn't testify. They levied everything they owned. They took their house away. They took the business away. They had a real rough time after that. Very rough time.
I mean, yeah, the life is very treacherous and shitty in the end. I mean, is what you get from a lot of these stories, man.
Not to be disrespectful, but Danny worked for Irv Weiner, who I told you about, as a carpenter. And when he was working for him as a carpenter, he had this other business on the side, and he wanted to grow. Well, they invested their money in his business. The minute you take money from the mob, you should know you got a problem because they own you then.
Yeah. I mean,
in my case, I could have closed the doors at any time and just walked away. Nobody owned me.
Right.
Danny's case, he got in bed with him.
Yeah, once you accept their money or anything from them, I mean,
Oh yeah.
you're in, and you're gonna have a hell of a time getting out. You know what I mean?
There was no way out. In retrospect, I've told both of his children, Nick and Joey, I've
Yeah,
said he would have been better off had he just taken the time, pled guilty to whatever they charged him with, and they would have taken care of his family while he was gone. When he got out, he would have had a business and everything else. But he had no plans. At 29 years of age, he didn't want to go to jail. He didn't want to go to prison.
yeah. I mean, no one wants to. I mean,
No, but if it means
living.
yeah, I mean, living or dying, and also being broke. I mean, he would have come out. He would have been flush. He had plenty of money. They'd have probably had 800,000-900,000 put away for him,
Jeez.
and they would have sent him commissary, take care of his family, everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, there's two different options, and unfortunately, that's what had to happen and go down. I mean,
It was sad.
yeah,
It was sad. I think Nick and Joey have both said at this point that it was bad judgment on his part, on their fathers. It
yeah,
was just bad judgment.
yeah.
Now, I
once
never met Danny, but I heard he was a very nice guy. Irv Weiner told me he was a nice guy.
yeah. So, what is your overall message that you would kind of leave with the people? I mean, like that you wouldn't recommend this life, or what would you tell someone if they wanted to get
This
involved?
life is kind of over. I mean, the mob just isn't what it used to be. They don't go around leaning on people and shooting people. The only people who are involved in those kind of things are druggies. People are in the drug business and stuff like that. I'm a dinosaur. I'm from the old age. I'm 73 years old, and I was the youngest around at the time. But what I would recommend is that in that time is don't get involved. Unless you really know what you're doing, don't get involved. And, you can only cheat so much in life, and eventually you're going to get cheated out of life. It's a matter of time.
That's
You
true.
can only cheat so much, and eventually you're going to get cheated. And it
Right.
may cost you your life.
Or your freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, both that could be both. Your life and your freedom. It could be both.
Yeah.
I mean, you could die in prison.
Yeah. And there ain't no coming back.
No.
Well,
My message to other people is if you see something that's going to cause harm to other people, talk about it. Don't be afraid. That's what the mob sells. Fear. That's what any criminal sells. Fear. They threaten you. Don't be afraid. Call somebody. Bring it to their attention. Get involved. Don't say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved in that. I'm afraid of it."
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways they use their tactics to get what they want, and
Don't be intimidated.
yeah,
Don't be intimidated. I don't let anybody intimidate me to this day on any subject. I don't care what it is. And I don't care if they're police officers, FBI agents. I don't care who they are. If they're people off the street, I just don't let them intimidate me, period.
yeah, because then they know they can't mess with you.
Well, you can always get a lawyer. You can always do whatever you got to do. I mean, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to bear arms, which I do. I have a concealed weapons permit, and I carry when I feel I need to.
Right.
I don't always carry, but I just live my life that way.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard people say, this is, you must have been pretty brave to do this. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just an adrenaline junkie that lived off the endorphins off it, something that I picked up overseas. But I don't know. I don't have the answer to it. But my message to other people is be happy, be well, and take care of yourself and your family, always.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to, end this show, man. Where can the people find your book? Obviously, I'll put a link in the description of your show and your book, but
I sent you an autographed copy. They can buy an autographed copy at redwemette.com. WEMETTE.com.
He even signed mine for me. There it is. Autographed it. To Adrian, I hope you enjoy the book. Good luck. Red. Yeah. So, I mean, if you guys want to get a copy of his book, I'll put a link
You
in
can
the
also
description.
get it on Amazon if you don't want the same price. It's the same price.
Yeah. And Red also appreciates the reviews that you leave on Amazon as well.
I really do. I've sold a lot of books, but the reviews just aren't there. There's 104 reviews. And I look at that. There was only 80 some a little while ago. Recently, I posted on Facebook, thank you for the reviews. And people are writing more. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I know I left you a really good one when I read it a few months back, So
I finally caught yours. I was going through and reading because there were new ones. And I was going through reading them. Wasn't yours back in September?
I think so. Because that's when you would have gave me the book, yeah. Yeah, so I read it a few months ago, and it's a really good read, you guys. So I think you guys really will enjoy it if you liked all of his stories, because there's a lot more to Red's life than what he's talked about today. And it's a really interesting book, and it's like, what, how many pages is it? It's like
234.
Yeah, so
it's only about a 3-hour read.
Yeah, overall I read it pretty quick. I mean, so it doesn't take long to read and nothing like that. But if you enjoy all these stories that he talked about.
There's a few pictures in there.
Yeah, there is.
Pictures of different people.
Yeah, like, even if I go through it, just skim through it, I mean, yeah, you can see and they're pretty clear too. So you can see.
That's Frank Schweiss.
Yeah. So they're pretty nice. I mean, he's written a hell of a book here. So, Nope, let's see. Is this one you right here?
That's me in the Marine Corps. Don't I look young?
Hell yeah. Young Red.
I was 17 when that was taken.
Yeah. This is the chapter, How It All Started. Yeah, so Red's got a really good book here. I mean, he sold quite a 1,000.
Yeah, I have.
Thousands
I really have.
Thousands. Yeah,
I did very well with it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Red, and giving me the opportunity to chop it up with you, man, and do an interview.
Well, that's quite all right, guy. We've been talking about this for what, a year?
Probably. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad we finally got it, but yeah, I mean, quite a while, you know what I mean? But I'm glad we finally got it going, man.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, everyone, for watching as well. I'm going to, like I said, I'll put all of Red's stuff in the link. I'll put a link in the description below. Please subscribe to his channel, my channel. And if you want to support me, I got merch behind me. I'll put a link in the description for that. And, thanks again for watching.
Show Adrian some love there. Give him some likes here, guys.
That'd be great. All right.